Ever feel like your body's holding you back? Well, Escape the Pain are here to help. Whether it be a sports massage, injury recovery, or those everyday aches and pains, they've got you covered. Feel better, move better, and get back to doing what you love. Visit Escape the Pain on Instagram to book your session today.
Find something that's not saturated. So it's all well and good saying, I'm going to leave teaching and I'm going to go into real estate. It's a super saturated market here. For teachers thinking about it, I wouldn't begrudge anybody. I would tell anybody to do it and give it a go if you're passionate enough and believe enough. Your time now is your time. And if somebody wants your time, you get to a stage where you start to charge for your time.
If I didn't do the work in teaching, it wasn't like I was an investment banker or I was a doctor. If I didn't do it, the world would keep spinning.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas if I don't put the work in when it's your own thing, no one else does it, and then you're not going to go anywhere.
Hi, I'm Chris Shrubsole, and welcome to School Talk, the podcast where we have meaningful conversations about education, learning, and those issues that matter most to students, to parents, and to teachers. With over 10 years' experience in international schools, I've seen firsthand the challenges, but also the opportunities in learning today. Each week, I'll sit down with inspiring guests to share stories, insights, and strategies on how we can help shape the future of education. Whether you're here to grow, to learn, or to spark change, this is the place for you. So let's get started.
Good morning. Welcome to School Talk. Today, I'm joined by Ross Hampton from Escape the Pain. So first of all, thanks for coming on the pod.
I really appreciate it, mate. Thanks for having me.
And today we're going to talk about your journey. You were a teacher, you're not a teacher anymore. I'm going to talk a bit about that and then we'll flow from there. So who are you? What did you do? What do you do now?
Was a teacher for around about 8 to 9 years. Taught in secondary schools at home, came to Dubai fairly recently, 2023, taught in a primary school, and then, decided to go a different direction and aim to be freelance primarily with the aim of probably starting something up myself in the future of Escape the Pain and sports massage.
Taught in the UK. What was the decision to go from the UK to move here?
I think anybody that in the UK will probably understand a lot of the factors. I think a big one, obviously, straight away, just on a light note, is the weather. Yeah. Obviously, that's a huge factor, isn't it? And I mean, you'll know yourself from living here. This year, we've had 0 days rain. Yeah. Compared to last year. But I think that was a big one. I think the change of scenery, I think people who were maybe a little bit in their heads a little bit more forward were constantly thinking, weren't they, about how do we move forward in the UK? How do we get to that next stage of our lives? Especially it's hard now for people in their late 20s and their 30s trying to buy houses, choosing between children, having houses, even getting on holiday. So look, from a personal standpoint, they were most of the factors in terms of that progression, trying to maybe like everybody, go to Dubai, do 2 years. That's the common theme. And then how long have you been here? 10. So we've done
exactly my story.
Yeah, there you go. And we've been here nearly 2 years already with no thought of probably going home at this moment of time. So from a teaching aspect, I think I just wanted something a little bit different. So I went from secondary back at home to primary here. Again, looking at the different visions of schools, different ways that they worked. I think that was a big thing for me as well. It's just something different. I think I just got to that position where I was stale. Look, schools and in general, I think the UK is on the way down, isn't it, at the moment, unfortunately, because it was such a nice place to live a few years back.
And if you're going to compare education in the UK to compare to schools here, what would you say?
Very, very different. I was in a state school. I went to a state school, then taught in state schools. I did a brief spell at a prep school when I was at uni, sandwich year. So even that world in the UK, just going from a state school to a prep school, was wild. I think maybe sort of a lot of your state schools are coming away from that community feel. You've almost got to be a robot, fairly emotionless towards the children. Even little things, right? Just 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they get upset, they cry, and you've got to just stand there and say, no, it's going to be okay. And really what they want is, a touch on the shoulder or a hug or you just can't do it anymore. Whereas in the community of the prep school, my God, what a different world. It was like, like little kids trying to hold your hand. It's like, that's okay. Or being able to get down on one knee and give them a hug. Different ages, mind. But again, that's what I really liked about moving here was that community feel around the school of being able to be emotional as a teacher. You didn't need to be massively emotionless. Safeguarding was there, but not to the highest standard of maybe the UK.
It's not to a higher standard, is it?
No.
It's in terms of they're very rational about it.
Yes.
If a kid does need a hug or something like that, then it's not taken out of context.
Yeah, it's picking and choosing, and I think you're safeguarding of kids getting out of rooms and getting to the road, or them sort of things where potentially might be some bullying and stuff going on. So the safeguarding in that situation was very high, obviously. But where it came to the teacher actually being able to be emotional and have emotions when they came into teaching, because it is a hard job. You need to have that emotion in there. They were some of the big differences that struck me. And of course, just the way that education is viewed here in a lot of the schools, probably primarily down to the fact that, they're paid schools, I would guess. The parents want the kids at school as much as they can, apart from certain times of the year, which again is very different. Some days you had a full class, and then after usually sort of your winter breaks, and as you would know, and then your spring breaks and stuff, it seemed to be an extended holiday for those people. Yeah. So you'd have half a class. But yeah, look, it was great to be a part of. I loved it. Just aside from a PE standpoint as well, being able to be outside for the best part of the year, bar from September, October, middle of November, you could get outside, which is something you just can't do in the UK because it's the adverse. It's the other way around.
And talk to us about money in terms of schools and money. Obviously, you said here everything is private. Everyone's paying to be there.
Yeah.
Does that have a negative impact somehow?
Yeah, I guess maybe people become reliant on the money in some sense that it's quite easy just to do stuff. Maybe you sort of lose track of being creative in your teaching, maybe, I guess, because you're able to rely on getting the next app or able to use AI, which is something in the UK that they tried to shut down quite quickly in schools and universities for obvious reasons. But they're really sort of taking that on board. And the school that I worked at really were innovative in that idea that technology was the forefront of the world. So learning how to use technology in a PE standpoint and having access to all of this equipment was amazing. But also then maybe you lost that creativity to be able to just think on the spot and teach and come up with different ideas, and your teaching skills that we spoke about before, which are so important in teaching, and having those skills. I think maybe you lose that authenticity around being creative at times and just thinking on the spot. But other than that, I think maybe that's where the UK is the other way around at the moment, is interactive whiteboards still aren't working properly.
Yeah.
In some classes, we still have just normal whiteboards with whiteboard pens. So the difference in that scale as well, when you're like, well, okay, that's a huge positive, clearly is amazing. Especially from that standpoint from PE, it was worlds apart.
Yeah. And your decision to leave teaching here, was it purely to follow your passions, or was it a slightly different mindset?
One of the reasons why I moved here, as I just said, was because of the stagnation that happened to me, I think, and a lot of people in the UK. I just got to that point where I was like, this is not how I think life should be. I think there should be more of a balance to it. And I'm not talking about having loads of money and not doing any job in the world. I'm talking about, I love teaching. But I watched friends and colleagues, especially sort of male teachers, not be able maybe to pick their kids up, go and see their kids at their classes, their sports days, go to their parents' evenings. All things that we don't really think about. We just sort of get on with. So the decision on that front came, I think, maybe in the UK. And I came here to try and rejuvenate myself and get my love back for teaching, which took some time. And I loved the teaching. I realized that I loved the teaching. I think the politics was what sort of killed me from my passion. And that got to a point where I wasn't being able to make a difference because maybe I wasn't in sort of those higher positions. I wasn't able to have not necessarily a view, because you are, but sometimes you could upset people with your view because you cared so much. Sometimes that got taken the wrong way because you were maybe a little bit too passionate.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit too forceful on your views at times. So to leave the teaching, and there was some personal factors in the decision as well. I got to I was here in August. I got to December, went home for the Christmas, got some news, started to make that decision, make plans, got to the April, and then it was like, no, I'm definitely, in the April, I still hadn't handed my notice in. And I, was super grateful for the way that the school handled my situation. The head teacher, the CEO, took it really, really well. They knew the reasons why I needed to do it. And for me to stay in Dubai that was my only option, was to move probably more so I had a bit more of a flexible lifestyle going on, so that if I needed to shoot home, I could, and that sort of thing. So that was ultimately the reason that pushed me over the edge, was something personal that I then made that decision. But yeah, look, there was loads of factors behind the scenes that maybe have been grinding away for a few years.
I think depends who's listening to this. If a parent's listening to this, they're thinking politics in schools, why would you want to leave? If a teacher is listening to this, they're like, yeah, I know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
But then having we've both done both now, we've both taught, we've both doing something different.
Yeah.
I would lean towards this now, but because of the flexibility.
Yeah.
But then I've never had the opportunity to go and watch all the kids at school and do sports days and things like that. Politics wise, from teachers out there, you know exactly what we're talking about. For parents that might not, politics in schools, what's that?
It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to talk about, because what you do as a teacher and what we do as teachers is we don't allow or let any of that affect us in our day-to-day job of teaching the children. You've got a world of teachers out there that want to be creative, want the time to be creative, want to be pushed, want to improve, want to get higher up so that they can make a difference to people. And if you're not, you also get a wealth of teachers that are just very, very happy with just teaching. Being that leader is not okay for them. And I think maybe that's where politics comes into it a little bit, maybe more in the UK, probably. Here, I think I was lucky. I said to you before, due to circumstances in the school, I was able to come here in the August and then be the head of department by the Christmas. So the opportunities were there. So from that side, politics maybe wasn't so much here. It was who do we think is best for the job? And I think maybe the politics from another side, I would say that because I got the job, but certainly the politics from another side during the situation maybe were a factor in it all.
Yeah.
And that was very evident in the UK at times. And politics actually, again, another one in my favor, led to me actually in my training year, completely not allowed. I wasn't even NQT. I was on my QTS at this point, and I had to teach a GCSE class, Spanish, full time.
Yeah.
And get them through from the February all the way through to the summer. And at the end of that, this school was supposed to give me a contract, and they went, "No, we're not giving you one." And
Thanks for coming.
And it was like, so I've just done all of that, and there was a lot. Look, there was a lot of politics again that went behind that decision.
Yeah.
I think maybe from a personal standpoint, as I just said, I probably didn't do myself any favors being on a QTS and maybe trying to make some decisions for people and questioning people on why these decisions were being made when it didn't focally point the children. So yeah, politics is a very, very different one. Teachers definitely will. But from a parent standpoint, please don't worry, because it doesn't affect the day-to-day of the teachers. Doesn't even affect them doing their job, because the teachers know that they're there for the children.
Yeah. And
they deal with the other stuff behind the scenes.
I think the big one, we spoke about it before, was that if you get to a certain point in leadership in school, then you get pressures from those people who own the schools, which majority of the schools here is for profit.
Yeah.
And then not that everyone in those positions has gone through the ranks, they've been teachers, they've been year leaders, blah, blah, blah. So they've still got the kids and education at the forefront. But we said before, then they've got the pressure of, you need bums on seats.
Yeah.
You need this amount of money this year.
Yeah.
You need to make these budget cuts or whatever it is. And again, like you said, parents never see that. And it's good that the kids never feel that.
Yeah.
I think the teachers just get the brunt of it. It is what it is, and carry on with the job. Yeah, for sure. Talk to us a bit about starting your own business. So you went from teaching to starting Escape the Pain.
Yep.
Easy process, hard process?
No. I think the big thing I've kind of fallen on my feet a little bit because I was able to get out in the evenings and I was working weekends.
Yeah.
Very supportive network of people around me, people really willing to help, give me advice. So I think for the forefront of that, obviously, I was able to do that and able to have a network of people. Was it easy? No. I think because of the hours you have to put in, the catch up that you have to do, because obviously for those of them that maybe are thinking coming over here and maybe doing tutoring and stuff, you have to get an NOC. It was something that was difficult, I think, going forward because I had to balance it off. So I didn't have an NOC, so I wasn't doing all too much. I did people that maybe I knew that were friends that I'd built up here. And they were the ones then were my support network that when I came to the end of teaching, when I was like, right, I'm going to give it a go, I didn't realize how much else I needed to know around it. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll just go and I'll build up a client base. It'll be easy. Wasn't like that at all, especially here. And that's not a negative to the UAE. That is, it's easy once you get there, and they are very pro business, but it's quite a complicated procedure because you don't know anything, right, about visas and where you have to go to get your visas. There's so many different free zones and mainland. Do you do this? Then the cost comes in. Great packages at schools. You don't have to think about any of that because they do it all for you. This came in, that came in. Savings were going at this. So you get to that point where maybe for 2 months, it's like, is this going to be worth it from an economic standpoint? And it wasn't all about money for me. I'm very much like you, as you just said. I like the flexibility that I've got now to come and sit here and talk to you. I wouldn't be able to do this if I was in teaching. So that flexibility has been a massive pro. But yeah, looking at it from top to bottom, money, you don't learn about money at schools anymore. Finances, how to budget. You don't really learn how to budget until you probably start doing your own thing and you go, oh, okay, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. Things that you have to give up. That's always a hard one, right? Is you have to give up certain things before you make it and before you get to somewhere. And even just general structure of a business. Where do you start? Where do you finish? What do I need in place? What procedures do I need to follow? Yeah. I think they're all stuff that you learn as you go. And I know that ties into another point we might talk about and cover in a minute. In UK schools, that they don't sort of have maybe that stuff that those kids maybe should be learning if they want to go and start their own business.
I think we've had a few people on the podcast before who have won the owner of Edfundo, which is kind of a child debit card.
Okay.
And they're trying to really proactive in teaching kids about money. Another guy coming on next week, Squirrel.
Nice.
More about financial literacy and stuff. But
important.
It always comes down to that, because it's not real money.
Yeah.
When you're doing these financial situations in schools, it's very hard to be like, you need this. You might not go without food, but it could come to that, starting a business. Like one of my daughters yesterday said, oh, you've made money from the podcast. And I was like, well, no, I had to spend a lot of money on everything first.
Yep.
I'm not all of a sudden just rolling in it. I wish, but I was like, there's a lot that you don't really, it's hard to take in as a kid, I would say. Yeah. But then I completely agree. The whole business side of it, the business acumen side of it, isn't taught in schools.
No.
Depending on certain courses and stuff.
Yeah.
But I did business management at uni. None of it was about how to actually set up a business.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of accounting, a little bit of marketing. Yeah. So yeah, very difficult in that respect. Most difficult thing about setting up a business has been
the hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get flexibility as time goes on.
Yeah.
The work that goes into it behind the scenes, people don't appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
The countless, we said, and I've said this quite a lot, is a good quote that I've heard numerous times now when I've been listening to trying podcasts or just listening to business people that have got successful businesses in the UAE, is that if you're working in it and you're working in your business, you can't work on it from the outside.
Yeah.
I think that stands a little bit differently for me, but then that's where it comes economically, right? Is getting out and being able to give free massages and be able to do some charity events. Yeah. And that side of it, I'm now in a fortunate position where I have a very, very loyal and very, very good client base. But yeah, from that side, the work that goes in behind the scenes, people only see when you're here, right? They only see when you're at the top, when things are successful. And, maybe like yourself, your daughter said, oh yeah, you've made some money. People will only see when you were there, but they didn't see all the risks that you took.
Oh no, last week I was an unemployed loser.
There you go. So within a week it's all changed, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, there's something in what she's saying, or the innocence of what she's saying it like. Yeah. But then there's that cynicalism as to adults who go, oh, well, you were lucky. No, I worked damn hard for this. And I took risks and I made decisions that were, tough to make. Could have gone one way or the other.
Yeah.
And, gratefully for you and for me as well, it seems to be going certainly at this moment in time in the right direction.
Yeah, touch wood, yeah. I think, again, there's a lot of teachers that are not looking to leave teaching, but intrigued to see what else is out there.
Yeah.
Would you give any tips or advice to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because, again, teaching in England, you can just go and do something. So in the UK, you can just leave teaching 4 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then you can go and do some tutoring. You can go and do, I don't know, whatever it might be, a yoga class or teacher, be a PT. All these little things where there's odd jobs, painter and decorator if you want, whatever it might be. Here, first thing is, if you're thinking about it, you need to check with your school on the NOC front. It's really, really important that we say that because a lot of teachers might not know that. And the consequences that might come if you get caught for doing stuff right.
If you're going to leave teaching, like we said there, especially here, NOCs, knowing the rules and regulations behind it. What about just leaving teaching completely?
It comes down to confidence and belief in your own ability to do that. I wouldn't, doing it now, it's at this moment in time in my life, it seems like the best decision I've made in terms of a work prospect.
Yeah.
It seems like the best thing I've done, because likewise with you, I can see flexibility and I can see time, and I have my own time. And instead of now bringing a load of work home and marking it and carrying on, all of a sudden now, if I don't want to work, I don't work. Okay, that doesn't bring in money, right?
Yeah.
But your time now is your time. And if somebody wants your time, you get to a stage where you start to charge for your time, especially from my side, for the appointments, unless I want to do something and work on it.
I think for me, just jumping in there, you feel so much more passionate. Not that I didn't feel passionate about teaching, but if I didn't do the work in teaching, it wasn't like I was an investment banker or I was a doctor. If I didn't do it, the world would keep spinning.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas if I don't put the work in when it's your own thing, no one else does it, and then you're not going to go anywhere.
No.
And then you're like, shit, what do I do now? So you have to put the graft in.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest takeaway, that I work so much more now than I did as teaching, because I'm like, it could be so good. And there's Chris Williamson, who's got a podcast.
Okay.
He was like, for years, I did podcasts that got 0 listens. I was like, I've never had that.
Yeah.
But I think each week you get some things that get so many views, some things that get no views. But you just got to keep cracking it out. Yeah. And just see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's finding something, like you've got to find something that's not saturated. So it's all well and good saying, I'm going to leave teaching and I'm going to go into real estate. It's a super saturated market here.
Yeah. Because you're looking at that top 5% of real estate brokers. Yeah.
And it's the same with tutoring. Here, it's a similar sort of line. And by all means, if you work hard enough, you'll get a client base that maybe you want to go and do tutoring. And I know a few of my clients that I've got, they do tutoring to overseas clients, but they've got not lucky, that's unfair. They worked and they found a connection with somebody in teaching, which then allowed them to get that connection. And they went, come with me. Yeah. But again, you're talking about a small percentage of people that are super rich that can afford to go, you're now going to teach just my kids. Yeah. And then they've branched out and done a few more because their friends have recommended them, or they've recommended them to other people in the classes. But for teachers thinking about it, I wouldn't begrudge anybody. I would tell anybody to do it and give it a go if you're passionate enough and believe enough that you're going to be able to be successful and make it work. But be prepared to work more than what you think you are going in teaching. It's just you enjoy it more, so you don't feel like you're working all the time. Yeah. And that's the big difference, I think.
Teaching's always there. That was my mindset. I'd stop teaching in April. I'd go back in September. Maybe not at the school I wanted, but there will be a teaching job. And that still remains the same now. Yeah. If no one listens to this ever again, I can still go back and get another job teaching, which I'd love to do. But in terms of, like you said before, building your own thing, is also really exciting as well. And some people like the security of knowing when they're working, when they're getting paid, when their holidays are. Yeah. Whereas very different stresses and struggles in business side of it. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned some regrets, like not having those higher positions in teaching to make more of an impact. How do you see yourself making more of an impact now, would you say?
A very different way, obviously, dealing with more adults now. And there is definitely
is it harder or easier?
Depends on who you get on the table. Yeah. Like some of them are dead quiet and they just sit there and they take a massage. And then some people are really chatty. And I think that depends on how you build a rapport with people. So I think it probably is easier, to be fair. I mean, I taught I did a course a few months back. I've got another one coming up, sports massage course. So again, any teachers that are thinking about it and want to do sports massage and interested, there are courses now that are UK based, so that they're world recognized.
You leading those courses?
Yeah, so I'm actually doing the teaching on them. The guy that owns the course, he's managed to set up a business out here, and then he is partnered with another sports massage company out here, who again was my first step in. He allowed me to get in and start finding a passion and realizing how much I loved it, and then that came into the mentality of people that was very different to the UK mentality. But in terms of the regrets, Yeah, being in a high position is something I always wanted to do in teaching.
Yeah.
From very early on, I had those aspirations. Head teacher was always my top aspiration. But then I think very, very quickly, I realized that maybe I wouldn't make it as a head teacher purely on the base that my view of education and how I wanted it to be for the children was very different to what maybe I had to do as a head teacher. And I take my hats off to a lot of head teachers who are able to maybe change their mold and change their vision and change their views to get to where they want to be and maintain it. I think that's the hardest standpoint for a lot of head teachers. At some schools, it's easy, right? They go in, they get a good every 2 years. In England, you get a good maybe here. It's easy just to tie over. Schools making money, so people are happy. Parents are happy. Children are happy. It's very easy once you get to that place. But if you've got a different view maybe than what the organizations want you to have, it can be quite difficult if it goes against your views and you're the person leading the ship, right? So that was always my viewpoint, was that's where I wanted to be. The middle leader role, doing that, I mean, stuff rolls up and down. It doesn't just roll down. It comes, you're that middle point. So that was difficult for a brief time. Trying to balance off going from just a colleague to then all of a sudden, bang, you're the boss of that department.
Yeah.
Again, I had a super team around me at that time. A lot of them have actually left that school and gone on to other schools now, or some have gone back to the UK, but they were great people to be around and I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. But yeah, regrets in that side. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that from an emotional standpoint that I don't really talk about all too much, but I did do to make the decision to come here. This is again, something we just talked about, is you have to give up stuff, don't you, to get to where you want to be, and teaching plays on your heartstrings. It's a fairly thankless task at times. I had a tutor group in my old school in the UK from year 7 to year 10. And that was probably the hardest decision, was telling them.
Yeah.
Telling the teachers, handing my notice in, dealing with the adults where my head teacher was super supportive in that school. Handed my notice in 3 weeks to the end of term because the job came available here, and you finish a little bit earlier than in the UK. It was like 3 or 4 weeks before the end of term. And he was like, look, is it something you want to do? And I was like, it really is. He was like, fine, we'll make it work then. We'll accept your notice and I'm done. And again, like you just said, could be tongue in cheek, but he said to me, there's always a place for you here if you do come back. So yeah, leaving the tutor group was the hardest thing. And then you say a lot of stuff, don't you, when you're leaving in the heat of the moment and things. And I was never able to probably keep hold of some of the promises I made, like getting back to the end of year 11 for their graduation, or seeing the results day, because I had to come back here to potentially start teaching. And at that point then I'd already booked the flights and then realized I wanted to leave teaching. So I could have done it, but at that point I had to get back here then for clients because I would. So it was that concept, but that was my biggest regret, was sort of not seeing them all the way through. But again, you have to make those decisions for yourself and for your life, don't you, at some point?
Yeah. I still remember leaving teaching in the UK. I did my NQT year.
Yep.
And there was a lady who'd been at the same school for 37 years.
Wow.
And I went home that night and I was like, I got to try something different.
Yeah.
Just see what's out there.
Yeah.
And then, here we are. So go from there. Wrapping up.
Yep.
What would you say about someone who's passionate about teaching, but struggling with the challenges of teaching?
That's a really difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You probably, if you're super passionate about teaching, you could always be in a worse industry, especially if you love teaching. They're making a huge change to kids' life. And that's how I started to think about it, was if I make a difference to one child's life that sits there in 20 years' time and goes, do you know what, I remember that teacher at school, then I'm super happy to have done it. And you as a teacher are making such a difference to those children. Okay, it might not be maybe always the best for people above you, to the side of you, parents, but as long as the kids are happy, then yeah. And if you are struggling, then I think change is always good.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to make that change, because there's especially having that belief in yourself, being able to teach in the UAE. I think that's a really nice thing about the UAE and the GCC, is once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools will take a risk on you. That's something that I found was really good. Like for me, once I was in, it sounded like, there was plenty of opportunities around. Yeah. People are always willing to listen to you. People are so nice here.
Because that can be changed within the school. Like, it's quite often easy to change year groups. It can be, there's a lot of schools now that are part of groups, change schools, all things like that. Just that fresh start is sometimes needed. But I think for me, in 20 years' time, a kid's never going to remember how you marked their book, how you differentiated a worksheet. It's going to be how you interacted with them.
Yeah.
And I find LinkedIn the weirdest place, because people post these pictures about feedback they've given their kids. And I'm like, I don't get LinkedIn. Like, who are you trying to, not kid, but this is a very weird thing you're posting. They care about how you interact with them in the morning. How was your weekend? What did you do? Have a laugh with them.
Yeah.
But for me, that's the most important thing about teaching. Like that relationship.
Yeah. And you see it in America, right, where they do all these handshakes.
Yeah.
I was one person that was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The amount of conversations I had with people like, oh, that's so cringy. Why?
Yeah.
Those kids love that every morning. And okay, fine, there might be year 7s and the year 11s might look down and go, well, that's not cool. But I guarantee if you did it with year 11s, they'd all buy into it in the end because they'd be like, wow, he's a cool teacher or she's a cool teacher. And, you know, I think that stage, so many people got ridiculed for doing that. And I thought, why? He had a personal handshake.
The colleagues, do you?
No.
Do it for the kids,
Yeah, and it's got nothing to do with the colleague. Like, you're teaching that class. If you're passionate about your class, if you are an English teacher and you only have, you know, set classes and stuff, you know, you get to know other children as well, because sometimes that could change and you can get other classes from the year below, year above. You can then sometimes even go and cover a teaching lesson and things like that. And I just think having that personal touch,
because that's that buy-in at the start of the lesson. They're engaged all of a sudden. They want to do well in that lesson. Yeah.
And I found that with teaching, just people that are struggling, try something different. Where for me, sometimes I did no teaching. I mean, I'm going to get ridiculed for that from the head teachers and stuff. But I bided my time. I picked and chose when I should do it and when I shouldn't. And I picked up on how the kids were feeling. And some days the kids were just grotty and they'd had exams, year 11s had exams, stuff. And we were going to teach them a lesson in PE when it could be fun. Get a ball out, play some football, play, you know, tag. I mean, the kids in year 11 loved capture the flag. I mean, just such a simple game. And it was not cool at the start, but once they started to buy in, a few more got into it. So trying new things and taking them back to the stuff that they think is not cool anymore, but sometimes they really do find it quite engaging and lovely.
I think it all comes down to relationships in teaching, in life, really. Everything's built on relationships. And I think we always need to try and prioritize that with kids, with their interactions with each other, their interactions with new people, adults, even me and you today. We hadn't met face to face before this.
No.
But if you have poor interactions, relationships, it just doesn't work, does it?
No.
Especially if you're hosting a podcast.
Of course.
You need it a little bit.
Of course. And if you're massaging somebody.
Exactly.
So,
table talk.
Yeah. But relationships, as you just said, that's probably one that I've missed off. And that's maybe where sometimes I went wrong in some of the schools I was in, was I wanted to build relationships first, rather than tick boxes and teach second. And I always found that came because I always had to buy them. And I used to say to kids, now you need to get your heads down. Okay, fine, we'll get our heads down and we'll get done. But relationships in walk of life are so important, aren't they? I agree.
Good way to end. Ross, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Again, Ross and Escape the Pain are there to help you as well. So if you want to get in contact with Ross, I'll leave all his information on the show notes as well.
Appreciate that.
And I'll tag him in all the social media stuff as well. This has been School Talk. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Again, if you want to reach out to Ross, really good guest today and really interesting story. So thanks again and bye for now.